Thank you for that introduction, Macarena. Let me just share my screen. Are you seeing it?
Not yet, Tansil.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, right now we are seeing your screen.
Okay, perfect.
Tansil, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm speaking. I didn't realize I went back on mute. I'm so sorry, guys.
Okay.
So thanks again for joining the session. We would have had one of these sessions in the past on Microsoft Azure cloud models. Would have been an introduction to the different cloud models that we're going to present to you all today, for those of you all who would not have been able to join the previous sessions that we would have had. So on the agenda today, we're going to be discussing what is a public cloud, what is a private cloud, what is a hybrid cloud, and we're going to compare and contrast the three different clouds. So with cloud adoption, what we're going to do is basically understand your deployment options with public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. Now, it is important that there is no one type of cloud of computing that is right for everyone. So there are various cloud computing models, and they have evolved to meet rapidly changing technology needs of an organization. So with the three types of clouds that we would be looking at today, the deployment method you choose would solely depend on your business needs. So that's important to know. So what is a cloud? So according to the internet, now we would actually have heard cloud computing before. We would have heard, applications in the cloud, storing information in the cloud. Many of us would have heard this term before. We have even used the cloud before, but how would you actually define what is the cloud? So basically what the cloud is, it's a type of computing where individuals and the business would rely on some sort of third-party application. And that third-party application would there manage their data and computing processes via the internet. So you would find that there are different types of cloud computing services out there, such as the AWS, there's Azure, there's also the Google Cloud. So the public cloud, what is it? How does it work? Now with the public cloud, it's pretty much one of the most common type of cloud computing deployments out there. So the cloud resources, such as your servers, your storage, these are actually owned by third-party cloud service providers. So with the public cloud, all your hardware, all your software, other supporting infrastructure, that would be owned and managed by the cloud provider. So Microsoft Azure, which is what we would be discussing, is an example of a public cloud. Now, when we also talk about public clouds, there is a need to have a clear separation as to where you'll be deploying your services, right? Would you be deploying it either to a cloud service provider, or are you going to be deploying it to your own data center? So because if it is you're hosting the public cloud, it means that all your resources will be hosted in the public cloud, and you would not own any of your own hardware. So that's something to take in consideration. Now, in the public cloud, you are able to share the same hardware, your storage, your network devices, with other organizations in the cloud. And this is actually referred to a term called tenants, right? So you can access services that you would manage your cloud account via your own web browser, right? So the public cloud deployments that would be frequently used to provide such things as your web-based emails, your office applications, your development environment. These are different types of the deployments that you would use in accessing a public cloud infrastructure. Now, with any type of deployment model, there is going to be some advantages as well as disadvantages when you are talking about cloud and cloud models. So some of the advantages that we are seeing here is that there's no CapEx. So therefore, no capital expenditure, and therefore there's no big initial investment from your side. So that's a plus. So now with the cloud being highly available, it's also agile by default. So you would get all of these advantages by default. Now there's the pay-as-you-go pricing. So you only pay for the resources that you would use. All right. Now, because Microsoft would manage all of the hardware, there's no hardware maintenance required. There's no deep technical skills from your team, which is also a plus. So you may not have someone who may be aware of the workings and the ins and outs of the technical side of your cloud environment. But if it's used, you have another party like Microsoft hosting your infrastructure, there's actually no technical skills that your team really needs to manage the cloud. Now, one of the major disadvantages when it comes to the public cloud, there's the security and compliance. Now, while this cloud is secure by default, yes, there are some major security requirements or government policies. Well, government policies like industry standards, your legal requirements, you would have those sort of things governed that the public cloud would not be able to meet. And in that case, the public cloud might not be the right fit for you. And you can probably look at the other models out there. Ownership as well might be an issue. This is only because if you want to make, say, your hardware changes, that you cannot do just that, as Microsoft would be hosting your hardware and managing the hardware within their own data centers. So if you're looking to have ownership of your cloud resources, then the public cloud may not be the right fit as well. And also, if you have any specific unique business requirements, the public cloud also may not be the best option for you to go, right? So there are some advantages, but there are also some disadvantages that you guys also need to be aware of. All right, so what is a private cloud? The second model of discussion is the private cloud. Now, when we talk about the private cloud, yes, they are classified into two categories. Here we're seeing we have the on-premise private cloud solution, and we also have the hosted private cloud solution. So with the on-premise private cloud solution, what this actually is, it's allowing the business to be able to host their cloud environments internally at their location, right? So when we talk about private, it's going to be not at Microsoft data center, it's hosted internally wherever you are currently located. So what this does, it actually gives the business full control. It will give you more flexibility over your internal data, and it will also allow the business to have complete authority over your configurations, your servers, your hardware, right? Anything that you would be using, you're going to have full control over that. So if the business currently has system administrators already, or even the appropriate experts to be able to manage the system, using prospective deployment is usually the first stage. So with this decision to adopt an on-premise private cloud, the business is also going to take full responsibility for the cost and the maintenance. So this will include things such as if your hardware fails, or there may be some possible disaster incidents that you have to take into consideration that could possibly happen. Your IT department would have to now be in control of resolving those issues. Right? Businesses will also have to factor the need for additional costs, such things as your software licensing, for instance. You may also have staffing. If the system administrators aren't already part of your team, you may have to acquire persons with those skill sets, right? So this is one of the most important things to evaluate before you think about which cloud model you're going to choose. So you're going to evaluate between your hosted versus your on-premise private cloud solution, right? Now with the hosted private cloud, right, because we did mention that there are two, with the hosted private cloud, this is basically a solution where the solution is owned and it would be operated by a third-party service provider, right? So it will allow you to deploy applications and store your data on an infrastructure without having the business to invest hardware, software, services, even staff, right? But the key difference for the hosted and the on-premise private cloud solution is that with the private cloud, you are managing it solely, and with the hosted private cloud, you can actually have your solutions owned and operated by another third-party service provider. Now, with this private cloud solution, it can also help your business with any server regulatory requirements that they may need to follow based on their industry practices. So the third party would manage the server access, the security. They may provide optional support, and it can also manage your data center. Now, since the infrastructure servers, it serves as a much wider clientele, customers can benefit from economies of scale. Now, because of this, customers will be able to receive your cost reductions, and this is actually a benefit because with this, it can occur in companies to increase their production, right? Another huge advantage would be of a hosted private cloud would be that it is on a larger scale. So with a larger scale, it comes more resources, and this provides more of a on-demand scalability option for your end users. So that's another plus. Also, lastly, another huge benefit to this solution would be that the solution would be providing support. It could also provide management. So the cost of maintaining the on-premise solution can cost big, the cost can be high. So it would cost big for both equipment and the necessary staff. So the two factors to take in consideration, do you want to incur that type of cost within your company, or would you rather outsource the hardware, the servers, all of that to another third party where you don't have to worry about if something goes wrong? Do I have the internal staff to take care of it? How do I go about fixing the solution? I have to put up more money to resolve said solution. Or do I allow my third-party vendors to handle all of that for me? Right? So when we talk about private cloud, it will therefore consist of your cloud computing resources used exclusively by the business, and that's one business, or by the organization. And as I noted, a private cloud can be physically located at your organization on the site data center, or it can be hosted by a third-party service provider, right? So one thing to note is that you would definitely need to provide a self-service in order to consider, well, order to be considered to use the cloud, right? So you would need to provide all the benefits of the cloud except in your own data center. All right, with regards to the services and the infrastructure, with regards to the private cloud, it is always maintained on a private network, and the hardware and software is dedicated solely to your organization. So we mentioned with the public cloud, the services are actually shared amongst various persons or various organizations that we may be using the cloud. With the private cloud, it's different. The resources and all the private network, your hardware, your software, that's dedicated solely to your organization if you opt for that option. So in this model, you are the one maintaining all the hardware, right? This way, the private cloud would definitely make it easier for organizations to customize its resources to meet the specific IT requirements. So you are going to find that the private cloud would often be used by various government agencies. It may be used by various financial institutions or even other mid to large size organizations which has business critical operations that they require control over in their environments, right? The private cloud may be a better suit for that individual. All right, so this is just a little information diagram on the private cloud. Now, some of the advantages and disadvantages of this model. Okay, so firstly, there's definitely more flexibility. So because the organization is able to customize its cloud environment to meet the specific business needs, you are able to maintain everything you have and the possibilities of supporting pretty much every scenario, right? So that's definitely a plus when it comes to the private cloud. So you are more in control. You have control of your security. It allows you to meet any security and compliance requirements, and that is not something you would get with the public cloud, right? Because that was actually one of the disadvantages based on your unique securities and stuff like that. The public cloud might not be a fit, but with the private cloud, you are able to meet any security, any compliance requirements that you may have. Your resources are not going to be shared with others. And also you're going to have higher levels of control and privacy where possible, right? It's also more scalable. This is because the private clouds often offer more scalability compared to the on-premise infrastructures. Some of the disadvantages we are seeing here is that one of them is the initial CapEx. Now, however, though maintaining your own hardware would come at a cost, this would be only because of the initial investment, right? So this will actually be because of your initial capital expenditure investment that you would need to make. So that is a sort of a disadvantage. However, if you are interested, if your pros outweigh your cons, then this still may be the best fit for you. However, you have limited agility by the amount of hardware and skills of your team. So yes, you may have someone supporting you to be able to resolve certain issues or do certain things in your cloud environment, but the skills may be still limited, right? The thing is, when you deal with private cloud, excellent skills and expertise of your internal team is definitely mandatory, only because you are hosting everything yourself. And if anything breaks, you have to be the one to fix it. And now with the hybrid cloud, this is where you get public cloud benefits and you also get the private cloud benefits. So what it does, it combines your on-premise infrastructure or your private cloud, and it's going to combine that with a public cloud. So the hybrid cloud would thus allow your data, your apps to move between the both environments. So with this model, you are definitely now going to be able to take advantage of both the public and the private cloud. So you can connect each model together, which provides a greater flexibility out of the three options. So many organizations actually will choose a private cloud approach because due to the business imperatives such as the meeting of the regulatory and your data requirements, this may actually be a best fit for most persons. But then again, it all depends on your business requirements. If a private, a public, or a hybrid cloud best suits your needs. Now, some of the benefits that would be considered when using a hybrid cloud platform, it gives an organization many advantages. So you would have things such as greater flexibility. You would have more deployment options, your security, your compliance, and getting value from your existing infrastructure as well is also a plus. Now, when the computing and the processing demands fluctuates, hybrid cloud computing actually gives businesses the ability to seamlessly scale. They can scale up, or they can actually scale up on their premises infrastructures, all right? And the public cloud can handle basically any other overflow that may occur. So everything that you need to do, you can do solely on your on-premise infrastructure, and anything that you can't handle on your own, you can have your third-party persons to manage such issues or other fixes that your team may not have the expertise to deal with, right? So therefore, your organization is able to gain that flexibility. It's also able to have that innovation that the public cloud, would provide by running the certain workloads that you may have in the cloud. It will keep the information, highly sensitive information, that is in your own data center. And it will also allow you as the business to also meet the client needs or even your regulatory requirements. So this not only allows a company to scale computing resources, but it's in the turnaround, is also going to allow you to eliminate the need to make massive capital expenditures to handle short-term spikes in demand, right? So when your business, for example, needs to free up on local resources and for more sensitive information or your applications, this may be the option that most companies would be able to adapt to. Companies will also be able to pay for only the resources that they temporarily use, instead of having to purchase the programs. So they were able to maintain any additional resources, any equipment could also remain idle for a long time, because you're not going to have to pay for that usage. So in the public cloud, you're going to have to pay as you go. Well, they have the pay as you go model, so you're going to pay for what you use. But if you are hosting it privately, your resources can remain idle over a long period of time, and you are not going to have to pay for those resources, as opposed to if you were hosting it solely on the cloud, or whatever you're using, you pay for. And some of the advantages that we would see here is one being control. Because the organization is going to therefore allow you to maintain your private infrastructure or your sensitive assets, or even your workloads that may require low latency. The private cloud is going to allow you to have control over that. It's also going to allow you to give you the flexibility where you can then take the advantage of any additional resources in the public cloud when you need them, right? And notice I said when you need them. So as I mentioned, you deal with everything in your on-premise servers, and only if you require anything that you can't provide, whether it's staff, whether it's expertise, or whatever the case may be, you can therefore use it via the public cloud. Also, when we think about the hybrid model, there's also cost effectiveness. So the ability to scale to the public cloud, you would pay for extra computing power only when you need it, right? and also the ease of use. Now, with the transition into the cloud, it doesn't have to be overwhelming because you can migrate gradually. So you can phase your workloads over time in increments, going from hybrid and gradually migrating everything to the cloud. Now, when we talk about the advantages, the first obvious one that we mention, that's mentioned on the list here, is the flexibility, right? So you can also run legacy applications in your private cloud. You can use the existing infrastructure as we see here. And like I said, we can also meet the security requirements. But for everything else, move it to the public cloud, right? Now, the disadvantages that I have listed here on screen, it may be a bit more expensive. Reason being because you're going to be managing both environments. So you're going to have environments existing both private and publicly, right? It can also complicate. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive to manage, yes, but it could also be a little bit more complicated to manage, right? It's definitely would tend to probably put a bigger strain and bigger requirements on your IT team, right? So that's another thing that you need to understand. You would definitely have to manage the requirements in terms of your skills or your expertise of your IT personnel. Now, I want to just compare and contrast a little bit on the different models that we went through, just as an overview. So with the public cloud, we mentioned public cloud, we mentioned private cloud, and we mentioned the hybrid cloud. So with the public cloud, the services are offered over the internet. That's the first thing. It's also available to anyone who would want to purchase. And another thing that we need to remember is that those cloud resources, whether it be your servers, whether it be storage, those are owned and operated by your third-party vendors, whoever you have hosting. Your third-party service providers would actually own those resources. And those resources would then in turn be delivered to the business over the internet, right? Now, if you opt for the private cloud option, just to reiterate because we're comparing and contrasting here. With the private cloud, as we mentioned, it's going to have the business to gain exclusive access over the resources. So the users, whether it be the business from one business or the organization, they are going to have exclusive access over the computing resources. They're also going to be able to physically locate your organization on-site data center. It can be hosted by a third-party service provider, right? So you can have it either on-prem or you can have it hosted by a third-party service provider. With regards to the private cloud, just remember, if you do have it hosted by a third-party service provider, those resources would be solely for your organization and your organization only, and not shared like the public cloud would have. So public cloud resources are shared. Public cloud, it's available to each person that's using the public cloud, your servers, your storage, and it's owned by the third-party vendors. The private cloud, you can host it on premise, or you can host it in the cloud. Just the differences is that you as a business is going to have sole ownership over those resources. It's not going to be shared. And if you opt for the hybrid cloud, right, it will combine both public and private cloud functionality, therefore allowing your data and your applications to be shared between them, right? So that is pretty much the introduction to cloud computing in a nutshell, right? We have gone through the various cloud models, and like I said, it's based on your business needs. It's based on how best your business needs to probably keep certain information sensitive and all of that. They may not want another third party having access to all information, and then there might be the case because of their special or unique requirements, certain cloud models may not work. So I do hope that this introduction to cloud computing has been insightful to each and every one of you. I want to thank each and every one of you again for coming out and taking part in the cloud computing session. Like I said, we had this session in the past, and we decided to have it again for persons who would not have been able to join before. All right, I would like to thank each and every one of you again. Please enjoy the rest of your day.